It was at this moment that he knew.
He bucked up. Welcome. You're listening to Bucked Up with Sam Buck.
Fucked up! Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up! Now you have fucked up!
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? I'm Sam. Nice to meet. I feel like I've run into you at the club, but nice to officially meet you.
Yeah, man, nice to meet you as well. Sorry I had to move this, or should I say thank you for accommodating me moving this. I'm just got a lot of different things going on. And
No problem. I bet this is a really busy time for you.
Yeah, it's good. It's busy, but it's what we want after the last year. So
Do you miss jumping in the water?
Well, no, but what I am doing is a little bit more low key. I was so close to 365 days that I'm just gonna go to 365. So I'm still jumping in the water.
Oh, you're still doing it? Well, see, once you get in that routine, I bet you're like, oh, I gotta finish it. I gotta make it to the next goal.
Well, I mean, you're so close to 365, right? Like, it was like on day like 300 and whatever 30 or something like that, or 35.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if it was like day like 197, hell no. But I'm like, I don't know, how often are you going to get a chance to say you did something for 365 days straight that isn't, breathing and going to the bathroom? So
yeah, like a real thing. I guess we can start now. Welcome to the Bucked Up Podcast, Norm Laviolette. I really appreciate you coming on because I'm a big fan of your clubs and of what you did. We were just talking about the plunge. You're doing a year jumping in the ocean.
Yes. Yeah. It started out, obviously with the pandemic, all of our clubs, Improv Asylum, Laugh Boston, they're all closed. And my daughter, a high school student, she on May 1st, she like jumped in the ocean for something she was doing. And she's like, Dad, come on. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's just what a dad does. And I did it. And then I was like, oh, maybe this will be like, I live down by the ocean. I'm like, hey, maybe this will be kind of like the thing. Like, I'll make the bold pronouncement that I'm going to jump into the water every day until my clubs reopen. Never figuring, what was the stretch? Like, this is going to go past 100 days like that at the time.
And it was nice weather when you started, probably.
Well, I started May 1st, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
All right, even if it goes 100 days, what does it mean? I'm just going to go swimming every day during the summer.
Exactly.
That turned into much more than 100 days. But I stuck with it, and been raising money for out of work actors and writers and musicians and comedians. So something to do.
But that's also a really awesome cause, and congratulations on the club's reopening. Is that weird to have that day finally come after 330 days? You said.
Yeah, it's like 300. I think it was like 330 days. Certainly that there's a surrealness to reopening the clubs. In that, I've been doing this, for the better part of 25 years, right? So it's not as if like I've been doing this for a year or two and then it closed. I mean, this is my life's work. This is the, better part of my life now. So yeah, it was, and yet, obviously it's very gratifying to be able to get there. And for me, it's always, you always want to get past the opening nights of anything. In a lot of ways, I hate opening nights of anything. So that was the important thing to get by.
Yeah, because that's once you get the one, it's like jumping in the ocean the first time. Like when you did it the first time, you're like, oh, this is something I can do. When you get past that first night, it's like, oh, I'm back into kind of the flow of things.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to you want things to be routine, right? Mm-hmm. The psychological and emotional energy of opening clubs, opening nights, opening shows, it's just a lot. It takes a lot. And while certainly it's great to be able to, have to do that, this is what we do, and this is what I do professionally. So really, you want it to flow back into, it's no big deal. This is just what we do.
So you started with improv and then went into stand-up for the clubs?
Yeah, for the clubs. So we started with Improv Asylum, and we opened that club in 1998. So we started there and did that, obviously still doing it, and did that for a while. And then I think it was like around, I want to say 2010 or 11, something like that. the Comedy Connection was a stand-up comedy club here in Boston forever, and it was iconic. I mean, it was really probably one of the best true stand-up comedy club rooms in the United States. It used to be over in Faneuil Hall. Well, the owner of that, for various different reasons, decided that they wanted to move it over and more get into the theater business and operate the larger theater. And so, after, I think that was around, I want to say like 2007 or 6 or something like that. So I had done some work with John Tobin. John Tobin has done a lot in the comedy world. He's my partner at Laugh. And we had done different things together, just kind of tangentially. And so I approached John. I was like, hey, there's no true comedy club. There's the Wilbur, which is a great place to see really big shows, but there's no A-room comedy club now that the Connection has moved. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should do it. And what we also said was like, and let's take a look at the Seaport, because that's, we think that's, a hot up and coming place. So
you picked right. That is a hot, it's a big place now. The Seaport really did grow.
Oh my God. I mean, what it is now to even when we started, we opened the club in 2013. I mean, it's night and day. It's crazy.
I remember I was 17, living out near New Hampshire, and I just loved comedy. It's all I wanted to do. And when Laugh Boston opened up, I would go every single weekend, no matter who the comedian was. And that was kind of my introduction to live comedy. I do think of Laugh Boston as like, that's where I really got to see my favorite stand-ups now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's the idea, is to have that A room, because if you only have the theaters, then that means you're cutting out probably 75% of the incredible stand-up talent that is, quite frankly, economically is not going to fill a theater. So it won't make sense for them to be there, but a comedy club, they'll do very well in.
Yeah, but you had the Improv Asylum long before that. Was there a difference in opening up a comedy club versus an improv club?
Absolutely. I mean, everything is different. So the different models, you have your improv comedy, what I would say comedy club or comedy theater, and then you have your stand-up comedy club. Everything about them is different. The only similarities are that you're presenting live comedic entertainment for audiences, right? I mean, so functionally that's the same, but from a business model, from an artistic model, from an operational model, they're completely different.
And I took multiple classes at Improv Asylum to kind of get on stage before I did stand-up, but it seems like it's an easier way to kind of like build a community than with stand-up, where it's more on personal growth. Are the comedians going to put the work in to try to get up on stage?
I think you're right about that. I mean, the pros and the cons. And let me say this: like, I love both. I'm indifferent. When I started as a performer, and when I was coming up, I did everything. I did stand up. I did improv. It really didn't matter to me. It just so happened that I started to get more improv gigs, which meant I got better at improv faster, which meant I got more gigs. Type of deal. But I'm pretty agnostic to it. I think, though, the way that I always describe the two is, improvisation is a team sport, right? So you're going out there and essentially you're playing basketball. You have teammates, you're setting each other up, you're learning how to move around the court or the stage together, you're following the plays and the narrative, right? Whereas stand-up comedy, that's golf. That's you working on your swing, perfecting your own swing, perfecting your own routine again and again and again. And so I think you're right. I think the positive of improv is it's certainly easier to get involved in terms of that community. And maybe if you're like, I don't know if I want to do this by myself. And I think that's great. But there's a double-edged sword to that. There's a double-edged sword to everything, which is, and I'm just speaking as somebody that kind of does everything. I watch people become overly reliant on the ensemble, and that same thing that gives them confidence, which is able to go out on stage together, can sometimes erode their ability to go out on stage by themselves. Whereas stand-up, yeah, right, it's a lone wolf kind of thing. You got to be self-motivated to do it. You're not going to have a bunch of classmates or improv teammates saying, no, come on, you can do this. Come on, you can do this. Quite frankly, you might get the opposite. So there is that. But what I love about about stand-up, and this is historically true, it's an incredibly low barrier of entry, which is if you're willing to step on stage, you can find a stage. And in today's environment, that's not really the case for improv. You know, you got to pay, you got to take classes and all of that. So what I love about stand-up is, hey, the only barrier of entry is you.
It is true. It is. And I think that's why I took improv classes, and I was in an improv troupe on Cape Cod that did well, but I liked the lone wolf of it, the stand up. And I also, but I like having the community of stand-ups. I do feel like, yes, there are jaded stand-ups, but there is a community that you can build and work with each other. And I think that's kind of podcasting is built that, and having more stages, it's not one for all. You can kind of build things with other people.
Yeah, well, I think the best at any business, and it can be stand-up or whatever, you know, those that get good start to recognize that your success has absolutely no bearing on my success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like saying, like, I'm going to breathe as much air as I can, and when you combine breathe air, you're taking some of my air. No, there's plenty of air, right? There's plenty of stage. If you get good, you get good. If somebody else gets good, it's good for everybody. Ultimately, and as a producer, I want as many people to get as good as possible, because that means more people are seeing good comedy. That means they get excited about it, and eventually they'll come to one of my venues. So yeah, you know, and I think Boston historically has a really great stand-up community, you know, for what it is, and I think that, you know, on the other end of this apocalypse, I think it's only going to be stronger.
I agree. I think not that it weeds it out, but the people who didn't do it, they have this like yearning to do it. But the people who actually did go out and be able to perform, whether it's travel, were able to build something over this time. I mean, you said better comics. I remember when I first came to Laugh, and I would go for the headliners, and then I'd find out about people like Sam J or Will Noonan or Dan Bulge or Lamont Price or the local killers that now have really created something. But you need the local talent to kind of build up. You need people to inspire around you.
Well, it's an ecosystem, right? I mean, and that's what the clubs do. So you know, it's an ecosystem, or if you think about it, it's an incubator, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to identify the Sam Jays and the Will Noonans well before they're the Sam Jays and Will Noonans that you know now, right? I mean, we understand, having done this for a long time, this is an art, and art takes time. You know, we don't look at people when they first go on stage and go, oh, he or she's never going to make it. That has no bearing on anything. It's you watch. You present opportunities. You see how they take their opportunities. But in stand-up, it's on you, right? Are you going to keep committing to the work? If you keep committing to the work, theoretically, the opportunities will come. Okay, we'll put you up here. We'll put you up here. And then we start to see that. And I think Will Noonan and Sam J and Corey Rodriguez, you know, these are really great examples of, they're killers now. But I also remember when they were openers. Yeah. Right? Well,
what do you look for in comics on the come up? Like, what are you looking for in someone that is before they've really found their voice?
Oh boy, it's a really, you know, deep question in terms of this business. You can answer it a couple different ways. First and foremost, so anybody that might be listening to this that's in comedy or whatever, is don't be a dick. That's the first thing. It's not about how funny you are. It's not your voice. It's not your vision. I don't give a shit about any of that, right? If you're aspiring to do this professionally, this is a business, right? And so look, be chill, be cool. You know, show up when you're supposed to be, on time. Matter of fact, be there early, right? You'd be shocked, right? Especially as, you know, in the smaller rooms, when we book all these smaller rooms, you know, there's, as I say, a network of people that book these things, you know, an ecosystem. Just make their job easy, right? Just be there. So like, okay, great. You know, that guy's there. I don't have to worry about him. And you'll get gigs. I mean, no lie.
Mhm.
If you can be considered dependable in your early stages, you will get gigs, and dependable and not overly needy and all of that. Because we understand that once you get on stage, you need the stage time to get better and to work it out. So honestly, that's like the number one thing.
And
Like,
that's the double-edged sword, is because comedians, it is the lone wolf thing, but then they think, you kind of, I feel like I see some comedians, or even in my own head, if I'm being, you kind of feel that like you against the world thing, where it's like, no, I'm on my own path, but you need to work with others.
you're not on your own path, right? I
No,
mean,
it's not how that works.
and you have to think about it, right? So the booker who booked, Ryan Cott is our head booker, right? Books all of our clubs, Laugh Boston, but also books all the networks of rooms and clubs that we run across New England, right? Worcester, MGM Grand, all these different things. So he's got people who work for him helping out. And so, comedians are going to start in these smaller rooms, in these off markets, the Worcesters, the Springfields and stuff like that. So if you happen to be a comedian that gets booked at the Attic or at Woo Ha Ha in Worcester, show up early.
Yeah.
Get there early. It helps us if you succeed, right? We need people to succeed, but you got to help us help you. If you show up late, if you call and say you're stuck in traffic and stuff like that, okay, one time is fine. Stuff happens. If that's who you become, right? Then the booker goes, yeah, I'm just trying to get this show booked tonight.
Yeah, this is a business too, as you said. It's
right. So that's number one. And then, after you fulfill the don't be a dick and be on time edict, what you're looking for is somebody that has a strong voice on stage in terms of how they approach things, and somebody that's putting in the work to evolve, so that when we see you again in 6 months, we can see some evolution. When we see you again in a year, we can see that evolution. I mean, that's what we're looking for.
And I think that's true. Whatever comic I talk to or whoever, it's really just putting in the work and treating it like, I think comedians are a certain type of person, but then you have to get past that to be in the real world, how everything works. But sure. Is it the same thing in improv? I mean, you build up these classes and then you kind of can find the talent within there.
It is to a degree. Everything changes when you get into the professional world, right? Mm-hmm. There's improv teams or troops, and then there's professional improv theater, and that changes, and it's the same thing. So if to work at Improv Asylum, the main professional cast, that's our main stage cast. That's what everybody's striving to get to. Well, it's a long process. First, you have to learn how to improvise. Then you got to learn how to do it on stage, and same just like with stand-up comedy, you've got to learn your comedic voice and how you do this, and you have to get the reps. Then the difference is there's very limited opportunities for an improv comedian, right? A stand-up comedian, you look, you call, you go to shows, you do your open mics, you find out who's booking here. You're like, what? You're doing a show in Nashua? How do I get on that VFW show in Nashua? There's right. Yeah. I mean, that's how that works. In improv, that's not how it works. It's a very closed environment with, if you think about it, incredibly few professional opportunities, right? In New England, it's Improv Asylum. That's your number one opportunity. I'm not saying that you can't do a show on the Cape and do a show once a month and get paid, but that
is the club. Yeah.
That's a gig, right? If you look in America, there's very few. There's the Asylum in Boston. There's Second City in Chicago. There's the Groundlings in LA. Mm-hmm. There's 4-Day Weekend in Dallas, Fort Worth. There's Brave New Workshop in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Second City in Toronto. Mm-hmm. It's kind of it.
Yeah.
UCB to a degree, but they don't pay and they're imploding and they're a terrible model. I can do a whole podcast on how I feel about them. But so it's very limited, right? So what happens is, to do it professionally, you usually have to, you have to say, all right, I'm going to try to make it through the ranks of theater X, Improv Asylum, Second City, whatever. And so there, that becomes, now it's almost like, I equate that as like, it's like running a baseball organization. You start out in classes, you then audition for house teams, you then start finding things in house teams. Eventually, you have your open auditions for what we call the NXT company, which is our junior professional cast. We have open auditions like that, like once a year, right? We might take 3 to 5 people at best. Then another year comes by. And then, you have to then, be productive in the NXT company.
Yeah.
You're not there forever, and it's a professional company. It's up or out at some point. And so if you find success in the NXT company, then you have to hope at somewhere down the line, a spot opens up on the main stage and you're right for that spot. That takes years and years and years to get to the main stage. Which is good, because from a producer standpoint, not from a performer standpoint, from a producer standpoint, it ensures that when you see a show at Improv Asylum, you're always seeing an awesome show.
Yeah, because the people have worked so hard.
Yes.
Well, you said that you got booked more in improv. It must. Do you still perform at all, or do you miss performing now that you're on the business side of things?
I don't really perform in the traditional sense of improv or stand up, purely doing that. I mean, I guess if I'm pressed into something for the asylum, I'll do a show. I don't miss it too much, but where I do get kind of that performance, that performance rush, is I do a ton of, back before, the pandemic and stuff, a ton of corporate training and corporate speaking, and I get to do that. I was doing that all around the world. And so, that's where I get that fulfillment, which is I'm on stage in front of 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 people. I still get to be funny. I still get to perform. I still get my voice out there. It's more directed, because I'm often talking about, the tenets and ideas of improvisation and how that you can build things, or I'm talking about, building companies and stuff like that. But I'm using all of my skills that I learned as a comedian there, and I certainly get that rush to still be able to be on stage and make people laugh.
Yeah, well, you have a book, The Art of Making Shit Up.
That is correct.
And I was reading it, and it is, I feel like improv does help in the business world. I feel like more than being a stand-up would help in the business world. There are a lot of, I feel like, as your book, it's the yes and, it's the building, it's the being a team, it's, do you agree, or do you think the improv
absolutely.
did help you build businesses?
Yeah, improv is huge, right? Because at the end of the day, call it improv, call it whatever you want, it's collaboration, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it is. And by and large, we need to know how to collaborate. There's very few places where you get to go, this is what I'm doing, and everybody leave me alone, right? I mean, it's very rare. It's, be it in your own home or in your business or whatever. And so like anything else, that is a skill set that can and needs to be taught, which is, all right, it's easy to say, we need to collaborate better. Okay, that's like saying, we need to code better. Okay, but somebody needs to teach us how to code. I mean, you can't just say code better, right? And so improvisation at its heart is collaborative, and it's uber collaborative in that not only are we collaborating, but we're collaborating in real time in a hostile environment, right? Our hostile environment is 200 drunk people yelling shit at us.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do we get on the same page, negotiate, agree with an idea, and move it forward? And there's a skill set, and that's really what you're learning in improvisation. You're not learning how to say funny things. You're learning that skill set. And so we've brought that applied skill set to the business world, and it's a huge part of what we do. And as I said, we do it all around the world, or we were doing it all around the world, and it's all coming back again. So yeah, it applies there. Stand up, it's not as direct of an application in the business world, but on the other hand, there certainly are applications. Innovation, seeing things differently. Okay.
Self-drive is a big one.
Self-drive, self-creation, right? Being able to look at something where everybody else sees, A, you see 4, right? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's innovation. And that's a skill set that you learn through stand-up as well.
And I think it's the same thing with stand-up, where there is at least I felt it in myself. There's a change when you're not just doing material and then you're having a conversation with the audience and you're trying to get them to think like you think. It is, 200 hostile drunk people. It's like, well, how can I get you on my wavelength enough that whatever I say, you're on this train ride that I'm doing right now. It's not, I'm just reading a script.
Well, that's the job of the comedian. That's be it stand up, be it improvisation. What I talk about all the time, right? Our job when we go on stage, if you're in front of 200 people, you can't play to 200 senses of humor. That's impossible. They don't all have your sense of humor. And if you tried to play to 200 senses of humor, you would fail miserably. Our job is for a little while to bring the 200 to us.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It can be called many different terms, right? But pandering or whatever. But if you try too hard to please everybody, you'll please no one.
They can tell, yeah.
So, it's like, all right, you 200, you came here to see me. Get on board. I'm not here to see you and get on board with you.
No, you're getting on my wavelength. I'm not trying to pander to you. Well, when did you start performing? What made you get into this field?
As a kid, I always loved comedy, and my family was super funny. My mom, my dad, it was just always highly, highly valued in my family. And I'll say I grew up incredibly blue collar, incredibly low blue collar, right? My mom worked at the GM auto factory on the auto line. She's a small little French Canadian woman, one of 19 children.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they're all a bunch of loud little French Canucks yelling at each other, half in French, half in English, right?
19 people
my mom
over all the same stuff. Yeah, you have to be.
You do, right? And my mom swore like a trucker. And before any of your listeners go crazy, going like, well, that's a generalization of truckers or whatever. Like, relax. My dad was a trucker, so I understand. I can talk about it. My dad drove trucks. But my dad's super funny, gregarious as well. And so I think it was always, I recognized that was valued. I think I was a funny kid in school and in high school. I don't know if I was the class clown per se. I think there's a difference between a class clown and somebody who's funny, very funny. But I was always very funny, I think just because it was fun. And, I didn't do it as any kind of self-defense mechanism, be like, don't beat me up, I'll be funny. I don't know. Seems a good thing. People laugh, made me feel good.
Yeah, being happy is better than not being happy. Why not laugh? Yeah.
Yeah, like I've never created or come from the cliched broken space. Some people do. I never did. So but for me, I was just kind of an average kid. But I always liked that, and played football and all this kind of stuff. I grew up by Worcester in Grafton, Mass.
Okay.
And then ended up, I did like the senior play and stuff like that because I like performing, but typically I wasn't in acting. I wasn't a theater kid. But I'd host the variety shows and shit like that. And then I went to college. I ended up at UMass Amherst, and again, man, I wasn't doing much there. I was mostly having a good time.
What'd you study?
Political science.
Okay. Not even business. Well.
Oh God, no. That's a dipshit, man.
Yeah.
Shit. I was at UMass. I mostly had a good time with my friends and partied. I thought, or what I was interested in was maybe going on to the foreign service, that type of thing. I was even, actually filling out the application to apply for the foreign service. But again, I was funny. I was known as a funny person at UMass. And it was very interesting because I can remember towards the end of my time there, something was changing. Like, and it wasn't like I was, one of these people that was trying to be funny. I was just living. I was like, I don't know, it's who I am. But I started like always being like, oh, you got to meet this guy. It's so funny. Or being introduced as, oh, this is that guy I was telling you about, super funny. And it was weird because I was like, what are you talking about? Just shut up. This is who I am. But it's little bells started to go off. I'm like, why is this? And so I ended up saying, and I like comedy and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't know. And I don't know why I was always as ambitious as I was, probably because I felt like, oh boy, I probably can't do anything else. But I started my own late night talk show at UMass Amherst called Beyond the Norm. And It was terrible. It was awful. It was so much fun. It was great. It was everything it's supposed to be in college. And that was fun. And I did that. And then, all right, what else can I do? And I remember walking across campus pond and seeing one of those like little tear, like, when you're looking for roommates or whatever. It said, think you're funny, call Brian. So in all the, bullshit cockiness of a college kid who doesn't know anything, it was like, think I'm funny. I know I'm funny. Call Brian. That was Brian Jewell. Brian was the head
That's
of
a weird moment in your life. Do you ever look back on that moment? Like that could change, just like weird stuff like that. You see a little flyer on the
Yeah,
wall.
I mean, you do. It's a singular moment. It's in my book. It's in all the interviews that I talk about, because
Yeah.
I mean, I really do remember is the lake, campus pond was down to your right, and it was think you're funny. And there was a moment going, all right, I do. What am I going to do about it?
Mhm.
And so, it's action, right? Action is everything. Take the next step. Tear the number off. And then take your next action. At some point, call the damn number, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
How long did you wait before you called?
Oh, probably not long. Because I was cocky. I was like, I'm funny. And so I called, and Brian ran Mission Improvable, which is the on-campus improv group. Auditioned for them. I got in. And that's when I really started to be, started to be like, oh, this is clicking for me, maybe faster, at least in my mind, it was faster than maybe other people. And I was like, all right, maybe I can do something with this. And that's really kind of what put me on the path.
And you haven't fallen off. I mean, when did you switch over from being like a performer to going more into the business side and opening up clubs? And
it's a gradual process, but on some level, never, right? I mean, when we do this, we're independent contractors. You got to figure this shit out. Like, I don't care if you think you're a stand-up comedian and you don't think you're a business person, you're wrong. Like, you're not working for anybody. You're working for yourself. You're a company. You're an LLC, and you gotta, if your goal is to work professionally, and that doesn't have to be your goal. It's not good or bad. But if your goal is to work professionally, you got to start treating yourself like a company, like a business person, right? And so I don't know why, but I think for me, I just always assumed that anything I got was wholly going to be what I created for myself. And I really recommend everybody think like that, because here's the deal, Sam. Nobody needs you, and nobody needs me. If I go away tomorrow, the comedy industry doesn't stop. The comedy industry doesn't give a shit, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. And on one level, that can be depressing to think about. I always looked at it as liberating, which is like, okay, well then screw it. I'll just make everything myself. And I put the focus there. So I focus on performance, but I always focus on, well, how do I get the next gig? How do I create a consistent gig? Right? I'm like, all right. And then with Improv Asylum, I was like, well, we were doing a show at the Hard Rock Cafe over on Clarendon Street. And, I was a big fan of Second City, and you just apply your mind, right? And so I was like, well, man, there's no professional place like Second City here in Boston. What if we made it? Right? And so, all right. Well, I started looking around, found a theater in the North End. Each step, right? First, you got to go look. Once you look, there was a theater. It said for rent. So I called the for rent sign, and you take each step. And I was like, well, I'll just create my own theater. And there was no grand plan. It was, then I'll guarantee myself gigs in a bar to drink at.
yeah.
And then that got successful. So you got to learn how to run the bar and the company. And then you say, well, here's some other opportunities. And then you learn. But I'm self-taught the whole way.
Well, that's amazing. And it's funny because you said you didn't study business. You said you were a dipshit in college, but I feel like a lot of people hold themselves back, and it is just that you have to think of yourself as a business. Well, how did you get that mindset? Did you always have that mindset? Like,
I don't know how I got the mindset, other than, again, I think for me, it was always like, nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to create an opportunity for me. If I sit around waiting for other people to create opportunities for me, again, why would they do that?
Yeah.
What do I have to offer as a 21, 22-year-old dipshit who thinks I'm funnier than I am?
Yeah.
I have no value to anybody, right? I mean, I don't. So therefore, I better go convince people that I have value. And you can convince people, but you're still at the whims of those people. Or I can say, it was always easier, I guess, for me. I did Mission Improbable, and when I left UMass, some of us in Mission Improbable, we moved down to the Cape. I always kind of worked on the Cape.
What part of the Cape?
What's that?
What part of the Cape? I grew up in Chatham too. That's where
I spent a couple years in Yarmouth, West Yarmouth. I lived in Chatham for a summer with my sister, the Squire.
Yeah, I spent a lot of nights there.
Yeah. You know, and even then, like, so we went down to the Cape. I'm like, I don't know. I went down to Hyannis. I'm like, I don't know. Let's see if we can find a venue that will let us do improv. And it was great. It was, and I don't talk about too much, but it was really one of the best experiences I had. There was a gallery on Main Street in Hyannis, going down the end of Main Street towards Hyannisport. It was Richard's Gallery. And I don't know if you remember that or you knew it.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And Richard was like this old, you know, in my mind, because I was in my 20s, the early 20s at the time. He was probably in his like 40s or something like that.
Yeah.
He was like this old hippie.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going in and like, so I have an improv comedy troupe. We want to do shows. We're great. Can we do a show here? The guy's like, I don't know. Sure. I'm like, great. And so you create the thing, right? And it was always easier for me to create like that than to try to get you as a producer to believe in my talent. Producers don't have time to believe in our talents. We've got to get so good where our talents are undeniable.
Yeah, you have to prove yourself. It's like, I remember going to Sally O'Brien's for one of my first open mics when I was 17 and bombing and being like, that was the worst thing ever. But the only way I'm going to get better is if I keep doing this. Because if I just bomb and then stop and be like, I'll get good one day, it's never going to happen. You kind of have to keep eating shit until finally it comes to a place where, oh, I have something to offer and I'm proud of what I have to offer.
Sure. Look, the first step to greatness is sucking.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to suck, you're never going to be great, right? And what we do, it's an art form. You can be the funniest person in your group, and I'm sure you know, Sam, people that are way funnier than you. I know people that are way funnier than me in their peer groups and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That could never do this on stage. That it's irrelevant. Doing this on stage, it's an art form, and like anything, you've got to learn how to do it. And the only way you can learn how to do this, the only way eventually you can learn how to do improv professionally, is on stage. Now, the beauty is the industry understands that. So you can suck and eat shit, as we all did when we started doing myself included, as we started doing our open mic nights. It don't matter. Yeah, I remember doing my first open mic set. It was at the Comedy Vault on Boylston Street, legendary place, Dick Doherty's Comedy Vault. And I remember, being one of 19 people on a Sunday night or whatever. And I did my 3 to 5 minutes, and I sucked like everybody else. And I remember leaving and being like, oh man, this is terrible. I'm never going to get asked back, right? And I remember leaving, and the dude, I don't even know who it was, but working the door, barely looking up. And I was, I'm like, well, at least I'll just be nice. Cause, again, the not dick factor. I'm like, hey, just want to say thanks for having me. And the guy's like, kind of barely looking at me like, okay, yeah, good job. So I have another slot for you if you want to come back in 3 weeks. And I remember that was another one of those like, bing moments. I was like, yeah, put me in. And I remember riding the Green Line home back to Cleveland Circle, getting on at Boylston stop. And really remember going like, so if I'm willing to get back on stage, they will let me get back on stage. So therefore, the only barrier of entry is my physical and mental pain and revulsion.
It's true. You write about it in your book. You talk about how they're not going to remember. Like you don't remember the other people who bombed. So why would they remember you? You just have to do it.
Right. And clearly the guy's like, I don't know, I got a spot for you. The guy got up on stage. He didn't shit his pants when he spoke. You can come back. Mm-hmm. Right. It doesn't mean I'm ever going to progress past an open micer, to progress past that, you have to keep getting on stage and you got to keep going everywhere. But we also know, and you know this, Sam, right? You do enough open mics, someone goes, oh, there's another open mic in Cleveland Circle, or there's another one in Cambridge or Somerville or Worcester. Oh, and then you got to have the self-drive to call. And then all of a sudden you go there and like, oh, there's a pretty cool show that happens at Starland, or hey, they need somebody up here. But you got to be around and you got to be out at the clubs doing it.
You have to be willing to travel. When I started, I was on Cape. I would drive 2 hours each way every night just to do my 5 minutes and try to hit as many mics. It's when I hear people like, oh, that mic's 30 minutes away, I don't feel like going. I'm like,
well, you're not a professional then, or you don't strive to be a professional. Right? I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, if you choose for your lifestyle to live on the Cape and you want to do professional comedy, you'll be driving for hours and hours. And you know what? Nobody gives a shit about it.
No one cares. Yeah.
Shut up and go to your gig. And if 30 minutes is too far for you as a gig, well, then realistically, you don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You want the fun of the experience, which is an audience saying you're funny and applauding for you and telling you how great you are. That's what, 5 minutes. You don't want to do the work for the rest of the, hundreds of hours the rest of the week entails.
Exactly. It's like you have to put your over 40, you have to put your 80 hours a week in. Like you have to work overtime. It's as you said, it's a business. And I don't think people want to treat it like you have to put 8 hours a day. And like, I'll get lazy and I'll be like, I don't want to write today. But if I want to be professional, if you don't want to go to work, you have to go to work, Sure.
And what also makes this doubly challenging is it is a business, but it's also a lifestyle. Right. And I talk about this all the time in terms of, I talk to a lot of up and coming comedians or actors or whatever. And, it's always that same question of like, how do I do this? I'm thinking about, I want to do this professionally, and I always tell people, I'm like, look, while it is a business, it's a business that isn't a business, right? Because when you start, you have no intrinsic value. So you can't get paid or you can get paid very little, but you're not making money. So it's a lifestyle choice. And I always say, you better love the life, because if you don't love the life, there's a zillion easier ways to make money. You better love the uncertainty. You better love driving in your car for an hour and a half and 2 hours to do 5 minutes in shitty bars where nobody pays attention to you, and the anxiety and the uncertainty. Because if you don't like the life, I don't know how you could sustain trying to make it through.
No, you do have to love it. But I mean, you probably, when you were opening up your first club, when you just called the rent sign, I bet you probably went through a lot of tribulations through that to then get where you are to owning two of the, the most popular clubs.
Of course, I've heard it said, and I really kind of like it, look, this is us meeting for the first time, right? In terms of, in the past, but like this, I'm like, you're coming in at a very specific scene in my movie.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't there at the beginning of the movie. Right. You don't know anything about the movie. You just see like, look at this guy. He owns successful clubs, lucky for him. Right. And I'm in your movie at a certain point, and other people probably come to you and be like, they see you successful. No, it's all this stuff. It's hard. You take big risks and chances. I've screwed up, and I'm talking, Sam, not from a place of like, I know how to do it. Mostly I'm talking from a place of I've made every mistake you can make.
Because you taught yourself, you have to. That's how you got to where you are.
Yeah. And yet, for me it was, but this is what I want to do. So if I want to do it, I need to shut up and figure out how to do it. Right. And it's interesting because I always said, and it was almost like a throwaway line, which is like, hey, look, this is what I do. It's what I love to do. And if it all went away tomorrow, the next day I would just start creating it again. I never thought I'd have to live that. And that's exactly what happened with the pandemic.
Yeah.
It all went away. I mean, we all understand that many, many businesses, clubs, theaters have failed and gone under. All mine were on the verge of that as well. So I actually had to live the credo of, well, what would I do? Well, I'd recreate it all again. And that's what I'm doing.
Was that, you said you've made, was that a real Did you think it was over, like at any point, or did you still have hope?
No, I never thought it was over because, rightly or wrongly, psychological self-defense mechanism, whatever it is you want to call, I don't allow myself to think like that.
Hmm.
And part of it is, so like, it's just the way I think. But when all this was going down, I'm not an insane person. I recognize that things could be out of my hands where things could fail, right? But in general, when everything was going down, I made the proclamation to everybody, to all my employees and actors and comedians. I said, I'm not going to let one club go under, not one. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do it, but that was my driving mission. And by declaring that, what I was doing mentally is I'm not letting myself any off ramps. So now every decision that I'm making is to achieving that end. Whereas if I were to say, like, I don't know, I don't know if all these clubs are going to make it. I could go bankrupt over here. I'm kind of leaving myself an out.
Yeah.
And I refuse to leave myself an out. I'm like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I don't know how, but I'm going to just going to do it. And I recognize that at some point, if a landlord really didn't want to work with me, that could be out of my control, but I was going to do everything in my power. And so that's just how I approached it.
Do you think that's because you were a performer? I mean, if we take this into another field, you started as the janitor and you worked your way up as to the CEO. I mean, and you've seen all the steps, so you have a respect for them. You have a respect of the people who just stepped their foot in the door, and you have a respect to the people who are your peers. I mean, you've done all of it.
Yeah, I think absolutely it comes from a performer's mentality, right? I mean, what's really great about comedy and doing comedy, and even if you're doing it on an amateur or a student level or whatever, what's really great about it is it really allows you to build up a tolerance and calluses against failure, right? Because all along the way, we're just constantly failing.
Yeah.
We're failing when we start doing our open mics. We're failing when we start taking our first improv classes. Then we get better and we go up to that next level and we're failing again. And then you get better. And then you're like, all right, now you can open at a club, and you kind of eat it there until you figure that out. And then you get your first, feature set. Holy shit, I got to go for 15 minutes. And you fail again. Like you're just constantly failing. When you're starting a business, it's the same thing. I'm doing these things. Oh, I thought it would work like this. That sucks. I failed. I've got to do it again. And so I think that's where the comedy aspect really is powerful, and you can apply that. And now all of a sudden you realize, well, failure is really not that big of a deal as long as you address it and move forward. And I think that's what a comedian or a performer learns.
It's true. The biggest growth ever in my life happens after the toughest situations. I don't even mean just on stage. I mean, like in life, when I go through really hard struggles, I feel like I come out of it afterwards because I can either take the path where I make it worse and I feed into the bad thoughts, or I can be like, what can I do to make it past this? It's you taking that ticket off the wall, or it's the omens in life, the good things on your path that you see that keep you going so you don't ever give up.
Yeah. And now here's the thing. You got to learn, right? You can't keep making it. So I know it's very trendy to say failure and a culture of failure. It's okay to fail. You can't keep failing.
No, you have to learn from your mistakes.
You have to learn from your failure and say, how do I adjust that and move forward? If you just keep failing, well, then you're not learning anything, right? Then you're just, you're an insane person. But you have to say that the failure doesn't need to wreck you. You just have to say like, okay, what am I doing here? How do I get better? But that's what it is. And so you just, you keep moving forward, and here's the other thing. And at some point, if it's like, yeah, it's not for me, stop doing it. Because that's the other big thing. And I talk with performers and stuff all the time. I've had this conversation, which is like, why are you doing it? Like, you seem miserable. You seem to hate it. You seem, a place in your life where it's making you unhappy. It's not getting you what you want. I'm like, why are you doing it? Because I don't want to quit. I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Like, but this comes from a very singular place that I've never created from a negative space.
Well,
So
it goes back to your childhood when you said, I didn't know why I was fun. I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to laugh. It's like,
Yeah.
why choose to be miserable? You control your life.
Right. So, so there's that, but yeah, and I don't know what the future holds. I'm creating stuff. There's opportunity out there. I think that it's going to be gangbusters in the end of 21, 22, and 23. So I'm super bullish on it, but look, I still got to get it there.
Yeah. How do you feel about the future? Do you feel like it's bright now that we're kind of past this? Are you hopeful, or are you still wary?
No, I'm super hopeful. I think, it's going to take time, like anything else, but I think that especially with live entertainment, I'm wildly bullish on live entertainment.
Mhm.
I think the second half of 21 going into 22, I think there's going to be an explosion because it's just genetic. It's not like it's a choice. Genetically, we're programmed to be together and do things together, right? And so I think it's going to explode. I think that people are going to be pent up. I think there's going to be a little bit of fatalism, which is, shit, this thing could end at any moment. I better get mine now, right?
Mm-hmm.
All that, it plays in favor of people that produce live entertainment.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
If anything, not only am I reopening my clubs, I'm actively in negotiations and working on acquiring other venues and stuff like that.
Oh, see, you didn't even expect that to happen. You took this very shitty situation and you can grow from it. You can either, as you said, you can take the path where you're like, I don't know, or you can be like, no, what can I do to make this better?
Right. And if, in my business, what I do is I produce live entertainment, specifically, comedy oriented. Well, unfortunately, some places, clubs, theaters are going to go under and come empty. Mm-hmm. So if I believe in the future, which I do, and I believe in my own talents and my team's talents and what we do, I'm like, well, then that's an opportunity. So I'm all right.
Yeah, the fatalist idea will help performers too, because the people who are never wanted to get up on stage because I think are like, it could end any minute. Why don't I try following my dreams? Why don't I?
I agree with that. And I also think that there's, and this is going to sound super harsh, there's a culling that will happen on the other end, mm-hmm. right? Which are those people that were on the fence going like, do I want to keep doing this? They'll be like, no, I want to, I found joy being at home raising honeybees. Yeah. Wonderful. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And then they get out of the way for people like yourself,
I see.
And that's not a bad thing.
And that's happened in history before. I mean, after the last comedy boom, there was a real lull, and that kind of was able to make the people really want to do it step forward, and the people were kind of like, this isn't my thing, take a step back.
Absolutely. It's just a natural progression of thing, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. And so it expands and contracts, it blows up. And then there's a ton of clubs, and that means more people want to try doing it. That means more people try doing it. They're not all going to stick with it. It contracts again, Are you
ever sad that you didn't take the performer route?
Not really. No, there was a time where I probably was, when things were happening quickly in my 20s. I was 26 when I opened Improv Asylum.
That's crazy. Congrats 26 opening a club, and it still is what it is today. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And that was great. And, and you did all that, and that was exciting. But then all of a sudden, you're 30, you're 31, you're 33. And you're like, so many of my peers that I started with, look, even with Improv Asylum, I thought I'd like open this thing up for a year or two. My goal was to move to LA, right? As if LA was calling for my talents. Hey, we need an unknown person from Boston with no credits to come to Los Angeles, right? But that's what I thought I was going to be doing. And then Improv Asylum worked, it took off. But my goal, I think, was always, unlike some people, my goal was I just wanted to work and make a living in comedy and entertainment, a decent living. My goal wasn't to be a giant star. It was like, hey man, if I can make a good living like everybody else, but be doing this nonsense, I've made it. I've come from a low blue collar background that would never tell you I was going to be doing this. I've done it. So, so I achieved that in my 20s, and then all of a sudden, but then you're like 31, 32, 33, your peers are in LA, New York, they're auditioning for things, they're writing on stuff, and you're like, oh man, is this it? Did I make a terrible choice? I'm still doing improv in Boston. I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Fast forward to now I'm 40. I'm 41. All those peers that went to New York, almost none of them have made it, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say to yourself, who would trade positions with me at 40? Those peers, if they're saying like, all right, you can make, I don't know, I'll make up a number, right? If you can make $100,000 a year being in the comedy industry, owning a couple companies, living, decently, a decent life, or you be miserable in New York or LA. At 40, probably almost everybody would trade positions with me. And I'm not talking about the 1% of the 1% that are on a sitcom or in movies. Mm-hmm. And so then I remember kind of switching back and going like, oh man, I'm so glad this is the path I took.
And it worked out, and it shows that you were on the right path. Because as you said, life is not going to give you what you don't want. If it's not for you, you're not going to continue doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's worked out for me, right? Mm-hmm. But for me isn't for you, and for you isn't for somebody else. And I can't tell you what your path is or what's good for you. But for me, this has been great because I had a family, and for me, I wanted to, I wanted to control my own, just like my career, I wanted to control my own personal path, which is if I wanted to coach my kids' sports teams, my daughter's sports teams, I didn't want to have to ask anybody. I never had to ask anybody. I was like, yeah, I coach their teams. I don't need permission from anybody. And the true value in the success of if is deemed any kind of success of what I've done, it's not monetarily, it's not even artistic or creative. It's the fact that to a large degree, I can dictate my own time. And you can't put a price on that. And I'm sure there is an algorithm out there somewhere. And if not, somebody should create it. But like the value on the control of my time probably has some kind of algorithmic financial value of millions of dollars.
It's true. Have you ever heard of the country Bhutan? It's a small country south of China, and they measure their GDP on happiness. Sure. They have a certain algorithm where they measure like the happiness of their people. And I think you're in control of your own life, and that's happiness. And that's what most people strive for. I mean, you hear so many people, I made all this money and it didn't make me happy. It's because they probably didn't do what made them in control.
Well, if you're making all that money, and look, don't get me wrong, I've always said, no, I'm looking to do this to make a living. And I'm a huge believer and proponent that artists, doesn't matter if it's comedians, actors, musicians, should create as much wealth as they can, because they offer just as much value to the world as an insurance agent.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can pay an insurance agent $80,000 to $100,000 a year, I think a good musician absolutely adds at least as much value to the world as that damned insurance agent, right? So,
yeah.
So I'm definitely not one to approach it from like, money doesn't matter. It does matter. Money is freedom to a degree, right? Mm-hmm. But with that said, it's, well, the idea, like at the age that I'm at and having done this for as long as I've done, the idea that I would have to show up somewhere at 8:30 in the morning, I wouldn't be able to go to lunch until noon. I'd have to come back in an hour, and I'd have to stay till 5. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like that literally, I'm like, how do you do it? And so with that said, the other side of it is I take all the risk, right? If everything falls, it's on me. There's super challenges. It's not all fun and games and laughter. There's plenty of heartbreak and missteps and all of that. But the trade-off is the time and the control that I get. And for me, I'm willing to make that. Whereas other people, they would never want to make that, because what they actually value and they need in their life is security. And I've never needed that.
And it's really true. And I think that's you've kept that artist mentality though. It's what you don't want security. You're still striving. You're not complacent, which I feel like a lot of people get to whatever level they're at and they're complacent.
Yeah. I mean,
But
you
you
know,
keep wanting to grow. You jumped in the water you're going to do it for a year. Like you care. You're doing, you still want, you're not complacent.
well, the creative process is what's stimulating, and creative means more than just what you do on stage. It's
Yeah.
an art to grow these businesses. It's an art to think, well, we've never thought about doing this. What if we do that? There's an art to saying, if I acquire another theater, how would I want to approach that? And what kind of shows do I want to put in? And there is that. And look, as you get older, your life changes. And so when you're younger, you can risk much more because you have much less to risk. It's just you. If you F up, Sam, I don't know if you're married or you have kids or anything like that, but it's just you.
Yeah, it's just
Whatever,
me.
right? I understand that I have many, many, many more people depending on me now. So I am more mindful of how I take my risks, but I'm always going to take my risks.
Yeah.
And when you reap some kind of reward, be smart, move it over here, so you got it, and then you can take some more risks,
Man, I really hope for people listening they have learned something, because this has been an amazing conversation. I'm really happy we got to do this, and thank you for all your knowledge and for what you've done to the comedy community in Boston. You've really made it. You've kept it going and made it something that it wasn't before, and I really do appreciate that and you.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you so much for reaching out. And look, I'm very fortunate to get to do what I get to do again today and tomorrow, and that's how I look at it. And I always remember, right? On one level, this business doesn't need any of us, and on another level, it needs and it welcomes everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the good part. So if you're thinking about it, today is the day. I don't know what the hell you're waiting for. The world has already told you it can all be pulled away at a moment's notice. So, if you're looking to do these things, the universe will let you do it. You just, go do it. It's perfectly okay. And hopefully eventually we'll see you at my clubs.
Where can people find your book, or where can people donate to your plunge if you're still doing the donations for it?
Yeah, you can get my book, The Art of Making Shit Up, anywhere you get books. So Amazon.com. There's also the audio version if, who has time to read anything?
Audiobooks are great. Yeah.
That's all I do. Listen to the damn thing. But if you want to buy the book, you can buy Amazon.com.
You read it yourself?
What's that?
You read the audiobook yourself?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to listen to that next.
Yeah. So I read the audio. So I think it's better that way. So yeah, I did the book on that. So you can get that at Amazon. You can go to normlaviolette.com. You can get it there. In terms of making a donation, so all of our donations are going through our nonprofit company called the No Rest for the Wicked Funny Foundation. So if you go to Improv Asylum /No Rest, that's where you can make donations there. And we'll be writing grants and providing grants to out of work actors, comedians, performers, musicians, artists. No genre is excluded. So you can do that. And look, you can always I'm not hard to find. It's Improv Asylum, Laugh Boston, Norm Comedy Boston. Google that. There ain't a lot of us.
Thank you so much for coming on, and everyone go support the clubs. Go to Laugh Boston, go to Improv Asylum. It's opening back up. So really go out and support, and thank you for listening.